came from the stars on a cold morning in December. It was not the first time Earth had received signals from the Galactic Coalition, but it was the first time those signals carried the sound of fear. Ambassador Al, tall being with silver skin and 4 arms, stood before the United Nations Assembly with his head bowed. His species, they were known for their pride. Seeing one of them humble was like watching a mountain kneel. Dying, Al said. His voice was steady but his hands trembled. The swarm has consumed 17 star systems in the past year. Our fleets are broken. Our soldiers are exhausted. We have come to ask for help from any species willing to stand with us. We all fell silent. Earth had only joined the galactic community 3 years ago. Humans were considered young, primitive, and too aggressive for civilized space. Most alien species looked at humanity the way adults look at children playing with sharp objects. Dangerous but not truly threatening. Certainly not useful in a war against a hive mind that had destroyed entire civilization. George Palmer sat in the back of the hall listening to every word. He was 50 years old with gray hair and scars on his hands from battles fought long before humanity knew they were not alone. He had commanded ships and led soldiers through the worst conflicts Earth had ever seen. Now, he watched an alien beg for help and felt something stir in his chest. It was the same feeling he had whenever someone needed protection and no one else would step forward. Continued his speech. He described the in detail. They were creatures that shared a single mind across millions of bodies. They did not negotiate or accept surrender. They simply consumed everything in their path, stripping planets of resources and life before moving to the next system. The coalition had been fighting them for 12 years and losing ground every month. Do not expect Earth to answer, Al said. Your world is far from the conflict. Your technology is not advanced enough to match ours. We came here because we are asking everyone, even those who cannot help. It is all we have left. Well, Palmer stood up. Every eye in the room turned to him. He walked down the aisle toward the podium where Al stood. The alien watched him approach with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. Humans were strange creatures. They smiled when they were happy and when they were angry. It was hard to know what they were thinking. How many soldiers do you need? Admiral Palmer asked. I blinked his 3 eyes. I do not understand the question. Came here asking for help. I want to know how many soldiers you need. Give me a number. Ambassador looked at the human as if seeing him for the first time. We have lost over 2 million troops in the past year alone. We need everything. But Earth only has 8 billion people. You cannot spare enough to make a difference. Admiral Palmer smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile a wolf makes before it hunts. Let me worry about that. You tell your council that Earth will answer. We will send soldiers. Spread across the planet within hours. Humanity had volunteered to fight in a war that was not theirs against an enemy that had destroyed species older than human civilization. Some people called it madness. Others called it suicide. But the recruitment centers filled within days. Young and old, men and women from every country and every background. They lined up to volunteer for a war in distant stars. Vant was one of the first to sign up. She was 40 years old and had served in the military for 20 years. She had fought in 3 wars and led soldiers through situations that should have killed them all. Her hair was brown with streaks of gray, and her eyes were the color of steel. When she walked into a room, people paid attention. When she gave orders, people obeyed. Stood at the front of the volunteer assembly on the day they were sworn in. Behind her were 300,000 humans ready to fight. Beside her stood Sergeant Dane Cole, a young man with a talent for explosions and a habit of surviving impossible missions. On her other side was Lieutenant Maria Santos, a combat medic who had never lost a patient and refused to start now. After Al watched the ceremony with something like wonder on his alien face. He had visited dozens of worlds asking for help. Most had refused. Some had offered supplies or ships. None had offered their own people in such number. None had shown such eagerness to die for strangers. Do you do this? Al asked Commander Vant when the ceremony ended. Your world is safe. They are not your enemy. Why would you sacrifice your children for us? Looked at the ambassador for a long moment. She thought about how to explain something that seemed obvious to every human in the room, but apparently made no sense to the rest of the galaxy. As you asked, she said simply. You came to us afraid and alone and asked for help. That is reason enough. I shook his head. Among my people, we would never send our young to die for another species. It would be considered wasteful, illogical. Your people have forgot something important, said. There are things worth dying for. Protecting the innocent is one of them. Standing up when everyone else sits down is another. We do not fight because we want to die. We fight because we cannot live with ourselves if we do nothing. First human fleet departed Earth 3 weeks later. 100 ships carrying 200,000 soldiers. They were not the most advanced ships in the galaxy. They were not crewed by soldiers with centuries of experience. But they carried something the coalition had lost long ago. They carried hope. The fleet jumped into faster than light travel. Vance stood on the bridge of her ship and looked at the star stream past. Somewhere out there, an enemy waited. Somewhere out there, innocent people were dying. And somewhere out there, humanity would show the galaxy what it meant to answer a call for help. Legends were about to begin. The system was burning. Vance stood on the bridge of her ship and watched the battle unfold on the display screens. Cola and valves were scattered across the void, some damaged and drifting, others retreating in disorder. The planet below them was green and blue, beautiful like Earth, and home to 3 million refugees who had nowhere else to go. Lieutenant Command is ordering a full withdrawal, the communications officer reported. They say the system is lost. The ending positions. They had sent 40 ships to take the system. Their valves looked like massive insects made of metal and organic material, covered in weapons that fired beams of purple energy. They moved in perfect coordination because they were all controlled by a single mind. No confusion, no hesitation, no mercy. Coalition command that the human fleet will remain, said. We are not leaving those refugees to die. Alice fell over the bridge. Her officers looked at her with a mixture of respect and fear. They all knew what staying meant. It meant fighting against odds that math said they could not win. It meant trusting that courage could overcome numbers. Cole appeared at her side. He was grinning, which was never a good sign. When Dang smiled like that, something was about to explode. Commander, I have an idea. The coordinate through communication hubs on their large ships. If we take out the hub, their smaller vessels will be infused for a few minutes, maybe long enough to turn the fight around. Do you plan to reach the hub? Their flagship is in the center of their formation. His grin whitened. I was thinking we could borrow one of their shuttles. They left a few drifting after the last engagement. My team can pat one up, fly it right into their formation, and plant charges before they realize we are not on their side. So did the plan? It was insane. It was suicidal. It was exactly the kind of thing that might work because no sane species would ever attempt it. Do it, she said. Take whoever you need. Gathered his team within the hour. Among them was Private Brooks, a 22-year-old soldier on his first deployment. Was scared. He did not try to hide it. His hands shook as he checked his weapon, and his voice cracked when he spoke. But he climbed aboard the captured shuttle without hesitation because his sergeant needed him, and because people on the planet below were counting on them. Launched into the chaos of battle, Coalition ships were still retreating, their captain convinced that defeat was certain. The human fleet held position, absorbing punishment and returning fire. On the planet's surface, Mario Santos had already established a field hospital. Wounded Coalition soldiers were being treated alongside human casualties. Many aliens had never seen a human doctor before. Watched with amazement as Mari worked without rest, moving from patient to patient, refusing to let anyone die on her watch. His shuttle slipped through the formation unattended. The aliens did not suspect treachery because the swarm did not experience treachery. They were one mind in many bodies. The concept of betrayal was foreign to them. This was the human advantage. They could think in ways they could not predict. Shuttle docked with the flagship. Dan led his team through corridors that pulsed with organic tissue and mechanical components fused together. The smell was terrible, like rotting meat mixed with burning oil. Gagged but kept moving. They planted charges at every junction, every critical system, every point that looked important. Were discovered on their way out. A warrior found them in a corridor near the hangar. It was 2 meters tall with 4 arms ending in razor claws and a head that was mostly teeth. Fired without thinking, his shots hitting the creature in what might have been its chest. It fell but made a sound, a psych scream that alerted everyone on the ship. Run, Danny ordered. Ran. More appeared behind them than in front of them. Danny threw grenades, fired until his weapon overheated. A claw caught one of their team members and dragged him down. They could not stop. They could only run and fight and hope the shuttle was still waiting. They dove aboard and launched as warriors poured into the hangar behind them. Danny hit the detonator before they were even clear of the ship. The flagship erupted in a chain of explosions that tore through its center. The communication hub was destroyed. Across the system, ships suddenly stopped their coordinated assault. They began moving randomly, confused, their shared mind disrupted. Seize the moment. All ships attack now. Hit them while they are disorganized. When fleet surged forward, coalition ships that had been retreating saw what was happening and turned back. For the first time in 2 years, they were losing a battle. Their ships were destroyed one by one until the survivors fled the system. The planet was saved. 3 million refugees would live to see another day. He collapsed on the deck of the shuttle as it returned to the fleet. He was wounded, bleeding from cuts on his arms and face. A coalition mech tried to help him but waved the alien away and pointed to a soldier who was injured worse. Help him first, said. I can wait. Mech stared at him. On coalition species, soldiers prioritized their own survival. The idea of putting a stranger's life before your own was strange and unsettling, but meant what he said. He sat bleeding on the deck while the mech treated the alien soldier and only accepted help when everyone else was stable. Word of the battle spread through the coalition within days. Ambassador Al sent a report to the High Council describing what he had witnessed. Humans fighting against impossible odds. Humans sacrificing themselves for strangers. Humans teaching the galaxy that wars could be won through courage and madness and refusing to give up. The council read the report in silence. Then they read it again. Something was changing in the war against something new had arrived, and its name was humanity. Months had passed since the battle of. In that time, humanity had become something more than soldiers. They had become legends. Across coalition space, children told stories of the humans who came from a distant blue world to fight monsters. Parents spoke their names with reverence. Soldiers who had lost all hope found themselves bleeding again because the human believed enough for everyone. Walked through a refugee camp on a world called Meridian. Thousands of displaced aliens lived here, survivors of planets consumed by the. They watched her pass with eyes filled with something she had not expected to see. It was worship. It made her uncomfortable. A girl ran up to her and pressed something into her hand. It was a small figure made of clay, shaped roughly like a human soldier. For you, the girl said in broad standard. For the brave ones who came. Looked at the crude figure and felt her throat tighten. She knelt down to meet the girl's eyes. What is your name? So the girl said she had learned a human name from somewhere. Many alien children were doing that now. Cudessa, I will keep it with me always. Minute, she put the figure in her pocket where it would stay through every battle that followed. A reminder of why they fought. A reminder of what they were protecting. Commanded the human force across the sector. She was 50 years old with short gray hair and a voice that could cut through any chaos. She had been a soldier for 30 years and had seen every kind of war humanity could fight. But this war was different. This war mattered in ways that went beyond borders and politics. This war was about whether decent people could survive in a galaxy that seemed determined to consume them. Viewed the latest reports in our command center. Human losses were mounting. 12,000 dead in 6 months. Each name was recorded, each story preserved. On coalition species, common soldiers were forgotten quickly. They died and were replaced and life continued. Humans refused to accept that. They remembered every fallen comrade. They carried their names into battle like weapons. Was one of the names that refugees spoke most often. He was 33 years old and flew a firecraft with skill that bordered on supernatural. The aliens called him the Ghost of Meridian because of a battle where he had destroyed 17 ships in a single engagement. He had flown through their formation like a spirit of vengeance, untouchable, impossible, deadly. Not think of himself as a hero. He thought of himself as a man doing a job that needed doing. When General called him to her office, he expected another routine mission. What she told him instead made his blood run cold. I've located a Mayor Hive ship, said. It is coordinating their offensive across 3 systems. If we can destroy it, we might put them back permanently. But first we need intelligence. We need to know its defenses, its weak points, everything. Want me to scout it, said. It was not a question. Ask for a volunteer. The mission is beyond dangerous. The chances of survival are very low. I will not order anyone to do this. About it for exactly 3 seconds. I volunteer. Launched the next day in a modified ship designed for stealth. The journey took him deep in territory, past dead worlds and shattered fleets. He saw the remains of civilizations that had existed for thousands of years reduced to ash and debris. They did not conquer, they erased. The ship was enormous. It was the size of a small moon, covered in weapons and sensors and hangars that spilled out firecraft like insects from a disturbed nest. Approached carefully, recording everything his sensors could detect. He mapped defense positions and power signatures and patrol routes. He found weaknesses that no one had seen before because no one had been crazy enough to get the clue. It was discovered on his way out. Patrol detected his ship and the chase began. Flew like he had never flown before, weaving through asteroid fields and debris clouds, putting his craft beyond its limits. His ship was hit twice. Systems failed. Alarm screamed. He kept flying. Escaped? Barely. His ship limped back to friendly space, trailing smoke and leading atmosphere. When he landed, the ground crew found him unconscious in the cockpit, still gripping the controls, still alive against all odds. Intelligence he brought back changed everything. Dr. Henry Shaw, a scientist working on anti-weapons, used the data to identify a critical vulnerability in the hive ship power core. A target strike could destroy the entire vessel. For the first time, the coalition had a path to real victory. Council Ra visited the front lines shortly after. She was the leader of the coalition, an ancient being from a species that had existed for 1,000,000 years. She had opposed human involvement from the beginning, calling them too primitive and too violent for civilized warfare. She came to see for herself whether the stories were true. Found surprised her. She found human soldiers sharing meals with alien troops. She found human mechs treating anyone who needed help regardless of speed. She found human engineers teaching coalition technicians new ways to repair damaged ships. She found Maria Santos working in a field hospital, covered in blood that was not her own, saving lives that others had written off as lost. Do you care so much? Ra asked Maria during a quiet moment. These are not your people, this is not your world. Maria looked up from the page she was reading. Her eyes were tired, but her voice was steady. Everyone is my people, every world is my world. That is what being human means. We do not abandon those who need us. We cannot. It is not in our nature. Had lived for 12,000 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had watched species evolve and go extinct, but she had never seen anything like humanity. They were young and reckless and sometimes foolish, but they were also brave and kind and stubborn in ways that lie. Turned to the Coalition Council with a new recommendation. The humans were not just allies. They were the key to winning this war, and whatever it cost to support them, whatever sacrifices the coalition had to make, it would be worth it. So humanity had shown the galaxy what it had forgotten, that some things were worth fighting for, that some people were worth dying for, that legends were not born from caution and calculation, they were born from courage. Assault on the core system was the largest military operation in galactic history. 300 coalition ships and 100 human vessels jumped into enemy space together. They carried 500,000 soldiers ready to fight, ready to die, ready to end the war that had consumed so many worlds. Van stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the enemy positions appear on her screens. What she saw made her heart sink. Been waiting. Their fleet was twice the size of the intelligence reports had predicted. Hundreds of ships moved in perfect formation around the massive hive ship that controlled their entire offensive. The trap was obvious. The enemy had known they were coming. Ships engage, ordered. There was no choice. Retreat was not possible. They had committed everything to the attack and they would see it through no matter the cost. Battle began with fire and fury. Coalition ships exchanged volleys with vessels while fire swarmed between the giants like angry insects. Human pilots flew with reckless courage, taking risks that their alien counterparts considered suicidal. Many of them were. Ships exploded. Lives ended. The void filled with debris and bodies and the echoes of screaming soul. Cole led a boarding team against a cruiser that was threatening the fleet's flank. His shuttle punched through the enemy hull and his soldiers poured out with weapons blazing. They fought through corridors filled with warriors that seemed endless. For every they killed, 2 more appeared. Dan kept pushing forward because that was what he did. He never stopped. He never surrendered. He never considered the possibility of failure. Reached the cruiser's power core and planted charges. The explosion would cripple the ship and remove it from the battle, but they were waiting at the extraction point. Danny's team was surrounded, cut off, outnumbered beyond any hope of survival. He ordered his soldiers to fall back while he held the corridor alone. At 7 minutes. 7 minutes of constant fighting against enemies that felt no pain and knew no fear. 7 minutes that gave his team time to reach the shuttle and escape. When they finally overwhelmed him, they did not kill him. They took him alive. The hive mind wanted to understand how one small creature could cause so much damage. It wanted to learn the secrets of human courage. The news on her bridge. Danny was captured. Her friend, her comrade, the man who had pulled off impossible missions since the first day of the war, was in enemy hands. Every instinct told her to mount a rescue immediately. Every calculation told her that doing so would doom the fleet. Made the hardest decision of her life. Continue the assault. We cannot stop for one soldier. Heard the order from his position on the ground. He was a sergeant now, promoted 3 times in 6 months because he kept surviving battles that should have killed him. He commanded 12 soldiers defending a critical supply depot on a moon near the hive ship. The Wanted depot. They wanted it badly enough to send 500 warriors to take it. That is 12 soldiers. They were tired, wounded, running low on ammunition. The smart thing to do was retreat to a more defensible position. The smart thing would save their lives. But retreating would mean abandoning supplies that the fleet desperately needed. It would mean letting the enemy win. Hold here said, no retreat, no surrender, we hold until relief arrives or until we are all dead. Soldiers not, they were human, they understood. It lasted 18 hours, and his 12 soldiers against an endless wave of warriors. They fought from behind barricades made of supply crates and fallen enemies. They fought with rifles and pistols and knives in bare hands when everything else failed. 3 of them died in the first hour. 4 more fell by the 6th hour. By the 12th hour, only 3 others remained. Fighting, not because they thought they could win, but because surrendering was not something humans did, not when innocent lives depended on them, not when their brothers and sisters in the fleet were counting on those supplies. Relief arrived in the 19th hour. A coalition RAD response team found sitting on a pile of corpses, his weapon empty, his body broken, his spirit undefeated. The depot was secure. The supplies would reach the fleet. Performed her own miracle during the battle. She was a sniper, patient and precise, stationed on an asteroid 3 kilometers from the main engagement. Her job was to eliminate high-value targets. She did her job well. And creature appeared on the battlefield during a critical moment. These beings were rare, larger and smarter than normal warriors, capable of directing local forces with frightening efficiency. Its presence was turning the tide against a coalition battalion that was close to breaking. Saw it through her scope. 3 kilometers of vacuum and debris separated them. The shot was impossible. Took it anyway. 1 bullet, 1 trigger pull, 1 perfect arc through the chaos of battle. The command creature fell. The assault faltered. The battalion survived. The overall battle was failing. Too many ships lost. Too many soldiers dead. The hive ship remained intact and they kept sending reinforcements from reserves that seemed infinite. General made the call that had been dreading. Forces tactical withdrawal. Regroup at Raglan said. Retreat was orderly but costly. Ships that could not jump were abandoned. Soldiers on the ground were evacuated when possible and left behind when not. The coalition fleet limped away from the core system, having achieved nothing except proving that they could be hurt. On her bridge and watched the enemy fade into the distance. Somewhere on that hive ship, Dane Cole was a prisoner. Somewhere out there, the war continued without pause. Somewhere in the halls of power, leaders would question whether victory was even possible. Did not despair. She had seen her soldiers fight against impossible odds and refuse to break. She had seen hold a position for 18 hours with 12 soldiers. She had seen make a shot that should not exist. She had seen humanity prove again and again that courage was not about winning. It was about refusing to lose. War was not over. The dark hour had come, and when dawn finally broke, humanity would be there to greet it. Hold was the gateway to everything the coalition held dear. Beyond it lay the core worlds, the ancient civilizations, the billions of lives that had never known war firsthand. The swarm gathered its full strength for one final assault. Every ship, every warrior, every resource they had left. If they broke through the threshold, the war was over. The galaxy would fall. Stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the enemy approach. The fleet stretched across the void like a wall of death. At its center flowed the Queen's vessel, the heart of the hive mind, the intelligence that controlled every warrior and ship in the swarm. Destroy the Queen and they would become mindless beasts. Destroy the Queen and the war would end. Well, George Palmer arrived with Earth's last reserves. 5 ships, 20,000 soldiers, everything humanity had left to give. He was 70 years old now, too old for active command by any reasonable standard. But he had refused to stay home while his soldiers fought and died. He would stand with them at the end, whatever that end might be. "It's good to see you, Admiral," said when he joined her on the bridge. Looked at the enemy fleet with calm eyes. "I promised Ambassador Al that Earth would answer. I intend to keep that promise until my last breath." Cole was still alive. He had spent 2 months as a prisoner on the hive ship, subjected to interrogation and experiments as they tried to understand human resilience. They never did. They could not comprehend a species that grew stronger through suffering, that found hope in darkness, that refused to break no matter what was done to them. Danny had used his time well. He had memorized layouts and schedules in weeks. Coalition commandos finally rescued him during a raid. He brought back intelligence that would change the final battle. But in the war room now, still healing from his wounds, pointing at a holographic display of the Queen's vessel. "There's a Weeks here, a thermal exhaust port that leads directly to the main reactor. The shaft is shielded against conventional weapons, but a biological payload could get through. Something alive, something the ship's systems would not recognize as a threat." Henry Shaw stepped forward. He had spent years developing a weapon specifically designed to kill. Engineered virus that attacked their neural connections, severing the bonds between hive mind and individual bodies. It was ready, it worked, but it needed to be delivered directly into the Queen's chamber to spread through the entire swarm. "One would have to carry it in person," Shaw said. "The virus needs a living host to survive the delivery. Whoever does this would be walking into the heart of the enemy with no hope of extraction." Santos raised her hand. "I will go." Turned to look at her. Maria had spent the entire war saving lives. She had treated thousands of patients from dozens of bees. She had earned the name Mother of the Wounded from grateful soldiers across the coalition. The idea of her walking in certain death seemed wrong somehow, like asking a saint to pick up a sword. "Are you?" asked quietly. "I understand biology better than anyone else in the room, because my medical training gives me the best chance of reaching the Queen, and because saving lives sometimes means being willing to lose your own." Teared to fly her in. His skills as a pilot were legendary now, spoken of in the same breath as heroes from ancient myths. If anyone could navigate through the defenses, it was him. They would launch when the final battle began, slipping through the chaos while every enemy eye was focused on the fleet. Battle started at dawn at Coalition. Ships clashed in waves of fire and metal. Fire swarmed. Soldiers boarded any vessels and fought quarter by quarter, room by room. Pushed forward with relentless pressure, throwing everything at the threshold, willing to spend 1,000,000 lives to break through. Ships formed the center of the defensive line. They took the worst of the enemy assault and held. Coalition captains who had once doubted humanity watched in awe as human vessels absorbed punishment that would have destroyed any other fleet. They watched humans die by the thousands and keep fighting. They watched legends being written in blood and fire. To ship during the thick fighting, Mari sat beside him with the virus container strapped to her chest. They flew through a storm of weapons fire that should have killed them 100 times. Hands moved faster than thought, dodging, weaving, performing maneuvers that the laws of physics seemed to forbid. Somehow they reached the Queen's vessel. Somehow they found the exhaust port. Somehow they got inside. Moved through the organic corridors alone. Waited in the ship, ready for an extraction that both of them knew would never come. She followed the path Danny had described, avoiding patrols, hiding in shadows, moving close to the chamber where the Queen waited. Found it. The Queen was massive, a blowed creature connected to machines and organic interfaces that let her mind touch every in existence. Guards surrounded her. There was no way past them, no way to complete the mission and survive. She did not hesitate. She walked forward into the open, letting the guards see her. They attacked. She released the virus. Spread faster than fire. The Queen screamed, a psych howl that echoed across the stars. Across the battlefield, warriors suddenly stopped fighting. Their shared mind was burning, dissolving, breaking apart into 1,000,000 confused fragments. Ships lost coordination. Assault waves followed. The swarm was dying. From her bridge as the enemy fleet fell into chaos. All ships full assault. Destroy them while we can. Coalition surged forward. Human and alien fought side by side, finishing what Maria had started. The Queen's vessel exploded when its reactor went critical. The remaining ships were hunted down and destroyed. By the time the stars grew quiet again, the war was over. A year later, a memorial stood at the threshold. It was a simple structure, a wall of black stone inscribed with names. Every human who had died in the war, every soldier who had given everything so that strangers could live. Maria Santos was among them, so were 12,000 others. It's now an admiral visited the memorial on its anniversary. She was 60 years old, her hair flew gray, her body carrying scars that would never heal. She touched the stone where Mari's name was carved and felt tears on her cheeks. A girl stood nearby with her mother. She looked at the names with wide, curious eyes. "Mother, what are humans?" Her mother knelt beside her and pointed at the wall. "They are the ones who came when no one else would. They are the legends who answered when the galaxy called for help. They are the reason you are alive." The girl nodded slowly, trying to understand. "Are they like us?" "No," her mother said softly. "They are better. They taught us what courage really means." The conversation and smiled through her tears. Nearby, new recruits were training, human and alien together, preparing for whatever threats the future might bring. The war was over, but its lessons would last forever. Humanity had answered the call, and the galaxy would never forget.